Good morning, everyone. My name is Shay, and it is a pleasure for me to present this session to you on behalf of Indian Origin Pride New Zealand. Before I start, I want to let everyone know that my presentation is based on my experience as a gay man over the last 30 years, my interactions in the rainbow community, in online and in person, in navigating dual identities as being a Kiwi and an Indian/Fiji Indian man flip-flopping between cultures. Also, my views on the rainbow acceptance and tolerance by the Indian community in New Zealand is based on the work I've been doing in the last 18 months to establish Indian Origin Pride New Zealand. Finally, some of the languages in the slides may be a bit uncomfortable for the attendees. Apologizing in advance, it's not intended to be. I just chose to state things as they are. So, Indian Origin Pride was established in August 21, and we officially launched it in May this year. Our aim is to lead the way for the community so that they can be proud of their identity. It is a support organization for rainbow individuals, our families and allies, and our main aim is to empower the LGBTQIA++ Indians to celebrate our ethnic, cultural, sexual, and gender identities collectively. It is created and led by community members with lived experiences who work with Indian community leaders, community organizations, and service providers to ensure our community is inclusive. So our main focus is to create a peer support program. We're currently developing a peer support program that will include LGBTQ+ group support for people whose families do not understand or support their identity. We're also working on a parents and family support group for families navigating the journey with a child or a relative, as well as a one-on-one support group for anyone who needs a friend to listen to, needs some reassurance, or need information and support. For many ethnic LGBTQ folks and parents and families, that is not easy to find. We have already started holding monthly mixes to create a space for the community to meet socially once a month. Currently, it's only in Auckland and Wellington, but we are also looking to move to other regions as well. We're also engaging with Indian associations and community leaders across New Zealand to bring the rainbow community to their attention and raise awareness and acceptance. On top of that, we are also collaborating with other ethnic rainbow organizations to become a collective voice for advocacy. So in terms of how the Indian community responds to the rainbow community, we are a very conservative bunch. We don't talk about sex or sexuality, regardless of whether we're talking about the heterosexual community or the rainbow community. Any kind of sexual activity by an adult is a matter of privacy. Sexual relations has always been kept behind the four walls, and we never talk about it in the open. The LGBTQ community in India is still very marginalized and discriminated against, despite being legally empowered, largely because they live in a society that has low tolerance towards sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. It is not only the society, but the family and the religion are also not accepting of these communities. The reason that I'm making the link to India is that this mindset exists across the Indian diaspora. We do have champions in New Zealand who are supporting us, but we are a long way away from full acceptance from our community. Indian Orthodox families think homosexuality as a Western or foreign concept rather than a natural thing. Therefore, they're not supportive. There exists a lack of communication between parents and children, and rainbow kids are often afraid to tell anything about their feelings to their parents. If they somehow do express these feelings, the families are not supportive, and often the topic is squashed. Or the lack of understanding between parents and children about sexual orientation leads to disagreements, and often, in some cases, children are pushed out of their homes. I've known of situations where if the children are old enough, they're forced into arranged marriages as well. There's also no such thing as sex education in India. I have confirmed this with an associate who is a doctor. He laughed when I asked him to tell me about sex education in India and said there is no such thing. I was born in Fiji and I lived there till I was 13. And even up to that point, there was very limited exposure to any sex education in school. Arguably, I left when I was quite young, but to this day, my understanding is it is very limited. So when we are talking about online safety, I had to think about the various platforms that I'm aware of, and this is not an exhaustive list by in any way. You know, back in the day, we had MySpace, we had Gator as well. What I noticed was that online harm is just not about dating apps or YouTube's. Often we find on LinkedIn as well the comments that are made towards minority groups. Often when we talk about ethnic rainbow or groups that we have formed, and the comments are like, well, why do you need to do that? Aren't you all part of the same community? Why do you have to separate yourself and become a subgroup in another minority? Why do we need a group of their own, and why do we need to highlight being a minority within a minority? So I wanted to share this because this is something that I've dealt with quite a bit in the last 6 months. Quite a lot of conversations which have really surprised me on LinkedIn from professionals who are questioning the need for an organization like IOPNZ to exist. So discrimination has many layers. Discrimination towards the rainbow community individuals can either from outside of the community or within the community. We're just as bad, when it comes to treating other people in our community. Individuals feel fear in online spaces to express hateful views, which are often veiled as preference. We often think that online spaces dedicated to the rainbow community or individuals will be free from this type of rhetoric. And yet, these are the spaces where this type of discrimination thrives. Online anonymity provides security, which can fuel these comments. These remarks would hardly be spoken if we were meeting face-to-face, not only because they're socially inappropriate, but because they may also come with certain negative consequences. However, they are pervasive on dating and hookup apps, in comment section of articles pertaining to LGBTQ+ individuals, or when issues are highlighted on large public forums such as Twitter. These remarks hardly spoken in real life settings because they are appropriate. But as I said, also, I've seen that in people, they're no longer afraid of stating anti-LGBTQ+ views publicly. We have to read comments online, on YouTube, and you can see the hatred. What is really interesting about YouTube currently is that people are not worried about the fact that they're not identified. The comments that are made towards the trans community is abhorrent. There's often racism, and these are seen on hookup apps. Profiles text explicitly exclude racial groups, such as stating whites only, or using degrading terms such as rice to describe Asians. Body shaming is also very popular in online profiles, often directed to individuals who do not accord to the unrealistic body types. Not everyone has a six-pack. It can take many forms, but usually it's related to the weight, height, and the size of one's appendage. Transphobia is also occurring in many ways and on various platforms. Often there's an immediate rejection of someone who may be trans by default. At other times, the trans individual is fetishized and asks questions that are inappropriate and probing. As with racism, trans fetishization can be equally harmful. Seeking out trans individual for sexual curiosity or alternative to heterosexual sex. Femme shaming is also happening a lot online. There's a particular in spaces dedicated to gay males where there is an obsession with the construction of masculinity. Slogans such as masculine for masculine or straight acting are commonly seen in these spaces. In these instances, gay men who do not conform to such masculine form, we just don't make the grade. So I've just used some of the information I found online about some of the things that people say online. I can talk to this screen for a long time because I have been at the receiving end of a lot of these comments. No blacks, no Asians, no Indians, particular, or sometimes people would start chatting with you online without knowing your background, and the moment you say you're Indian, you get blocked. the one about I don't hate Asians, sorry, not sorry, you're cute for an Asian, I usually like bears, but no panda bears. These are all happening today. Now, there are some apps who have gone as far as removing fields for race and cultural background. That does not stop these views from shared and comments. So this is very much alive today as well. When we talk about discrimination, it's also important to address the discrimination that we do within our community. I can talk to the Indian community, and there are many layers to it. Caste plays a very big role in terms of who we want to date. It's not just a heterosexual thing. Even in the gay world, people, if you're a Brahmin from the top caste, then you only want to date another Brahmin man. Religion plays a role. Class, there's a big divide. Skin color is a big issue in the Indian community. Lighter skin or white skin is seen as being beautiful. And accents, quite often what we see is if somebody's got a thick accent, people who do not have such a strong accent may not necessarily want to date them just because of that. So, we are our own worst enemies in many ways. We're also very quick to say, it's all about racism and point fingers at other cultures, but there's a lot of this stuff that goes on within our groups, and it's the pain we inflict on our own community as well. So in terms of what are some of our fears and consequences of being online, often we're dealing with profiles without pics, or we're not even sure if people are using their own pictures. This is in my experience, I found this in the Indian community in New Zealand. For the last 20 years, I've lived in Australia. There's a much bigger dating pool, but my experience when I've come back home has been there's a lot of profiles without photos, and often it's people from within my community who would reach out and want to make conversation, but would be very reluctant to share their own photos. And sometimes it's despite when you're asking for those photos, and it makes it for a very uncomfortable conversation because you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know, how this information is going to be shared, or any of the images or your images they're going to share with whom. Often we feel like we are being judged. And when you don't know who you're talking to, and where else the information going, that fear increases even more. I came out when I was a 23-year-old man, so being outed has never been an issue for me, and certainly now as the face of Indian origin pride, my sexuality is is very public. What I'm finding is there's a lot of people who still have the fear of being outed, and often what happens is there has been horrific cases coming out of India where groups target vulnerable gay men by inviting them to a secluded place and beating them up and then extorting them for money, or coercing them into sexual activities with the threat to be outed. So whilst we don't have that happening in New Zealand, in the Indian community, that mindset is still there, and it is a real fear. So for us, our community plays a big part, and it's not just for Indian communities, it's also for migrant and ethnic communities. We're very much connected to our community, and the fear and the shame that could be inflicted on our community is always a big concern to us. Research shows that the discrimination against the LGBTQ individuals has been associated with higher rates of mental illness, substance abuse, and suicide. There's even more disturbing when the discrimination comes from within the LGBTQ community itself, and it often creates a vicious cycle that can be difficult to break. And for those coming out of the closet or interacting with the LGBTQ online spaces for the first time and expecting to find acceptance can be a rather harsh shock. There's a strong need for us to be open about discussing the discrimination we feel online. Too often, those of us who are part of the minority groups normalize and downplay these experiences, and I'm no different. I've had decades of experience on this, and I have become desensitized to a lot of the comments and just say, you know, whatever, and move on kind of response. But what it is doing is that it's not stopping the people who are making this kind of comments, you know, to take account for their actions. You know, the sad reality is that, you know, that we are becoming desensitized. You know, it is also important, you know, we need to destabilize these damaging constructs that have been dominant for too long. The online spaces should not simply, you know, reproduce inequalities that are present every day in society. We should find ways of minimizing these inequalities through acknowledgement and dialogue and calling out perpetrators. You know, this forum is really important for us. You know, I can only speak to, with my experience as an Indian man, but there are just as many ethnic groups who are less empowered than what I feel. I'm a middle-aged man, and I've taken the step to be very public about my sexuality by establishing Indian origin pride. But I often, you know, get messages from people in other ethnic groups who are not there yet, but they're still looking for support. And the racism they experience online and the discrimination they feel online is something that makes it harder for them to engage in the isolation they feel every day. So I'll finish my presentation here, and I'd be open for any questions from the attendees.
How does the performance of racism online within the queer community, and how can we make changes?
I think what it's going to require is change within communities itself, because what we take to online is what we do in our everyday lives as well. But the biggest thing we can do is actually call out to the people who make these comments online. As I mentioned in my performance, what we do is we just think, oh yeah, just somebody being an idiot, and just move, you know, let's move on. And education is definitely needed, and also in the way we look at the queer community, not just as in gay men or lesbians, but the entire alphabet soup, for a better word, and also grow understanding and acceptance of us within the rainbow community as well. Because there's one is based on whether I'm attracted to somebody or not, and who I find hot and who I don't. But then there's a tolerance within the rainbow community that we have towards each other that also plays a big role. So it is about educating people and also empowering people to call out instances of racism. So the next one is any advice on how to support and practice cultural safety for LGBTQI+ Indian community, and as not ethnic individual. That is what we're trying to do with Indian Origin Pride at the moment, because there are people who, there's sometimes there's many layers to it. One is also about the disconnect. So sometimes people move away from the ethnic group because it's just so difficult, and they don't necessarily want to connect to that part of it, but they want to retain their LGBTQI identity. And what we're trying to do is create a space where you are an individual first, and an Indian, and then focus less on the ethnic part of it. And also, is what we try to do is connect with other groups of rainbow individuals as well from different ethnic groups. It's not that easy to just remove it as an ethnic individual, because there is something that brings us together. But what we're trying to do is not focus on our ethnicity, but it's more about us as LGBTQ, and then create a group and focus on that first. I hope that answered the question, Isabel. Pradesh has asked, what is your experience in general in self-reporting harmful things to online platforms, dating platforms, or rainbow community? Do you find it responsive? I've had mixed response to them. I don't know, sometimes it's hard to meet the bar. Often what I might find offensive not necessarily meet the criteria of the platform. And I do believe there are sessions tomorrow and the day after from some of the representatives of these platforms. So it's probably worthwhile attending that, but it's been a mixed bag and it hasn't always been satisfactory. We know about the problems, but what suggestions are there to keep ourselves safe and authentic? Safe and stay authentic. Sorry, can I just ask, you can hear my responses, right?
Yes, we're hearing your response as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, because I don't know pop up. I think safety needs to come first, and online safety is very important. We've had, I can share this with the panel, in our own family, we had incidents where a minor was targeted on TikTok by somebody pretending to be an 18-year-old, and luckily the parent found the messages and it became a police case, and after 2 months of investigations it was found, or rather that's how long they had the phone. But in that investigation, what they found was that it was a pedophile in the US pretending to be an 18-year-old on TikTok and sexting with the family member. So, we just have to be super vigilant. If you've got kids, especially, I mean, this session I'm talking as an adult, but, it also applies to rainbow kids. And if you, as a parent, it needs to be super vigilant and be aware of what your children are doing online. It is a difficult thing to do because kids get on technology very early on at an early age, and also it's very hard to take them off technology and invading their privacy or their rights. So there's that part of it, and then also in terms of authenticity, I guess we can only be who we are. It's not, and it's taken me a long time to come to this point to say that 20 years ago, if this question had asked of me, I would have been kind of walked away from my community and my culture and just pretended it's not there and just focused on being a gay man. But done the whole turnaround, because what I found was that what I was running away is what people were seeing, and that's what they were using to exclude me from spaces. I think what we need to do is own our culture, own our identity, of sexual identity, and not let other people use that to exclude us. In terms of what organizations are there to support wider ethnic communities, Indian Origin Pride is there. We've set up ourselves. It's not exclusive to Indians. We're happy to support anybody who needs help. I'm also working with other organizations to create Ethnic Rainbow Alliance. It is organizations like China Pride, Same Singing Black, and a whole range of other organizations representing the Latino community, Pacifica community, and the alliance is basically to bring us together and to create a voice for everyone. What we're seeing often is that we get left behind, when it comes to critical discussions and policy outcomes that affect the entire rainbow community. Our voices are not there. So what we want to do is create this collective, which is already underway, and invite people, whether you want to represent an organization or as an individual, to be part of that. In terms of using your pronouns to indicate gender, it is one of those things I've found. I've always saw it as, by me putting my pronouns there, it kind of gives the signal to other people that, I'm open and happy to accept people who they are and whatever pronouns they give me. I always saw it as a positive thing, and it's something I've always encouraged, especially when I talk to service providers in the Indian community, that they should do that. However, I get the point that it can also be weaponized and used against people. I don't have an answer for you right here, right now. But my advice would be to always use your pronouns and give this, let people know who you are. I think that's it for the questions.
There is one more. There is one more there from Isabel. Do you see that one? How can we start conversations with the parents who are not supportive of their children's rainbow identity?
Okay. With children's, it's hard. And the reason I say that is because it's how do you step over the boundary of a parent? In the Indian community, what we want to do is bring parents. So one of the reasons we want to start a parent peer support group is to start bringing in parents and making them more visible. And what we are doing is we've partnered up with an organization in the US, which was started by a parent of a transgender man. You know, when this lady went through her journey with the child, often she found that she was the only South Asian parent in the support group she went to. So she took the step ahead about 4 years ago to establish an organization. And now quite successfully, they run regular parent groups. And this is something that we want to do here, is actually start that and then create visibility about the work that how parents are getting involved in this stage and you know, taking positive actions for their children. And the way the sessions are run is it doesn't necessarily mean that the children are there with the parents. Sometimes it's just a group for parents. You know, often they come from a place of fear and not understanding. And our aim is to create this group and make it as visible as possible, so we can give signals to other parents that, hey, you know, if you are going through a similar situation in your house, here's a group we can tap into, and these are the people, you know, they can talk to and share experience with, and hopefully get them support that way. Just one more thing I would add to that is also there's a group for Rainbow Rangatahi that's also been started. I said it within the mind that it's the supportive parents who bring their kids to such groups anyway, but one of the requirements of the group is that parents can't just leave their children there and go away for 2 hours. They have to be present, and there's a separate space for parents to have their own conversations as well. So that's something that already exists, and we can, you know, share information like that publicly so that people, if they want to, they can attend those sessions as well. I think they meet fortnightly.
Doesn't look like there's any more questions.
All right, thank you, Sue. Thank you all for attending. I hope you found that helpful. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the week with all the sessions.